welcome to the HaskinCast Podcast. I am your host, Scott Haskin, here back for another week with another absolutely wonderful guest. We're going to get to her shortly. Very little to update you guys on this week. I've actually finished up and released the album Dreamscape. It is now available everywhere. Slowly creeping up in different places. It is now on, of course, you can link from my website, but it is now on Bandcamp and iTunes and Apple Music and Google Play and a couple other places, waiting for it to show up on Amazon. And Amazon always seems to be the one that kind of takes a little extra time to get things done. They're also probably the busiest since they handle such a variety of things besides just music, whereas like iTunes, Apple Music, Google Play, they're really designed just for movies and music. Amazon does all that and a ton of other stuff. So grab the album, take a listen. If you have some feedback, I'd love to hear what you have to say. You can reach me at scott@scotthaskin.com. I'd love to see some reviews, especially on iTunes and Spotify. I think it's on Spotify now too. I'll have to check. If not, it will be shortly. And, the process continues. I'm really excited to have this album out because it really brings back my youth. It's some of the collection of some of the first originals, first instrumentals that I wrote, and going back to 95. And really happy to have had taken the time to revamp some of them and, put a little bit of modernization into them. I tended to be very repetitive as a composer when I was first starting out. If it was fun to play, I just kept playing it and just kept adding to it instead of coming up with different transitions and different parts. So I found a way to kind of minimize some of the repetitiveness, updated a little bit more in sound quality than writing, but I did have to be a producer a little bit. So hopefully folks are enjoying that. I have had some wonderful comments come in so far. Very grateful to everybody who's listened, who's purchased it, who's enjoyed it, who didn't enjoy it but still listened to it, and especially anyone who's taken time to reach out to me directly. So please check out the album, rate it, review it. Same with the podcast. If you're enjoying the podcast, please rate it on whatever app that you listen to podcasts on. iTunes is and Apple Podcasts are like the biggest ones because people listen to more on that than any other format. So if you're going to leave a review, if you want to leave it there, I would greatly appreciate it. If not, feel free to leave it on whatever platform you're listening on. But I personally, as a user, am not on all platforms. I don't have access to all of that feedback. So if you have left a review or rating or anything there, I may not have seen it. But if you did, I still appreciate it. Thank you very much. So next week, I am going to be doing a different kind of episode, something interesting based on the timing of everything that's going on in the entertainment world. One big thing in particular, and some of you may know already what I'm talking about, but next week's episode will be all about that. And then I'll be back to a regular episode the week after. So hopefully you'll enjoy it and it'll be fun. I always say hopefully you'll enjoy it because I don't put things out there that I don't hope people will enjoy. So it seems kind of weird to say it, but it also seems kind of weird not to say it. I don't know. The whole thing is just weird. But this week, this very week, coming up right now, I have an amazing guest, one of the most beautiful souls I have ever stumbled across in this life or any past life I may have had. She is just one of those people that, you feel like she is just a ball of joy and positive energy whenever you're around her. I've had the pleasure of having some nice coffees with her several times when we both lived in Arizona. She's still in Arizona. I, of course, am in Las Vegas now. So we haven't seen each other in a while, but it was great to catch up. Had a wonderful conversation. She's a fantastic actress, a voice artist, acting teacher. She does some amazing voice characters too. And she's recommended some very specific audiobooks of hers to listen to, which I have listed in the show notes. All of those links are available to the Amazon page. If they have other offshoots such as ACX or audible.com, those are listed on the Amazon page. Also, make sure to check the other purchasing options. If the one that you want is not available, it may be available there. Amazon's kind of weird that way because they don't show everything on the page. So you have to look for that one specific thing. For example, I don't buy movies very often. Sometimes I will rent a movie on Amazon if I have some marketing and things to do and I'm kind of bored with Netflix. But a lot of times, like, it'll be an extra $1 for the HD version, which I don't really care because I'm not really going to watch the movie. I'm mostly going to listen to it. So I have to go to other options, and there I can find the standard definition, which is $1 less. Why throw away $1? $1 is not a lot of money, but you know what? $1 could do a lot of good to somebody else, so I'm not going to throw it away. And so look on those options too. See what might be available for your listening pleasure. But I can tell you, listening to her read, it's a very, very enjoyable experience. And she's just a fantastic narrator, great at character voices. I can't recommend her enough. She's absolutely wonderful. So instead of me just sitting here and telling you about how great she is, how about you hear it from her how great she is? Here's the lovely Alexandria Stevens. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the next edition of the HaskinCast Podcast. And I am so excited to bring my guest on the show, the wonderful, the lovely, one of the dearest people in the world, Alexandria Stevens. Alexandria, how are you?
I'm wonderful, and thank you for those amazing words. You made my heart smile.
Oh, good. Well, this is a good note to end on then. Thank you for coming on the show. It was the best show I've ever done. You're one of those people that you're kind of like a little smile that just walks around and it radiates out to everyone around you. And that's one of the greatest things I just absolutely adore about you.
Oh, thank you so much. I mean, I try to keep everything positive. I don't like negative vibes. So I appreciate that you notice that.
Oh, sure. And I really have gotten to the point myself where I'm just really filtering so tightly what comes into my world because there's so much aggression and so much anger, and everybody thinks that they need to teach you 10 lessons in every post, whether you need to know them or not, regardless of your thought process. And it's really a daunting thing to be on social media at all right now.
It is. And people are frustrated, as they should be with all of this. They're frustrated, they're angry. And, I call it coming out in pimples. You suppress it, and then it comes out in weird ways. Mm-hmm. And that's what's happening, I think, is it's just coming out in very weird ways.
That's a great way to put it. I think you're absolutely right. And I think it is manifesting with it. It's kind of like you drudge up one thing and then that opens all these other doors, and then those doors open other doors, and people are just kind of letting out all this emotion that's been pent up. Normally on top of the lockdowns and not being able to go everywhere you want to go and those kind of things, it's a weird thing to adjust to.
Yeah. And, I don't want to say one way or the other, but we've also got what I call the mask wars. The people are just battling each other over whether or not they want to wear a mask or the other guy should, or, it's literally a war. Right.
Now you're in Arizona. Are there still, can you still get fined for being out in public without a mask?
At this point, I've not heard that at all. Are there other states that are fining?
Yeah, I know that at least some counties in California are. We have that here in Vegas. I believe it's a $300 fine.
Oh, wow. I have not heard that, but, I might be out of touch regarding that.
Well, yeah,
but I go out and I wear it because it just seems like it's the respectful thing to do. It reduces stress.
Right.
So
at the very least, it's the lesser of two evils, right? You're not taking a chance, or you're only taking a chance if you don't do it, and you're taking precautions if you do. So if this thing is still as real as they claim it is, then you're playing the safe rather than sorry card. Plus, you're also putting yourself in a position of not getting as many dirty looks and people being like kicking you out of the store, because some stores, in fact, our grocery store just announced that you are required to wear a mask if you are to go in their store.
Absolutely.
And it kind of makes sense because, for one, if it's a law here right now, or whatever it would be called, it certainly makes sense that, they're not going to say, hey, you can circumvent the current state of what we're supposed to do in our store. That's what the directive is. So we have to adhere to that as a business, and we're responsible for keeping everybody safe. Because if one person catches it and they trace it back to my store, well, now I'm open to a lawsuit.
Right. And it's just, you like you said, you're protecting yourself and you really are protecting others. And what's so bad about that?
Yeah,
but,
I agree.
Other than that, people should do as they please. And, I just don't come near me if you're coughing and sneezing. That's all I ask.
Right. Exactly. It's just, it just goes back to being respectful of other people. And I understand people that are saying, that they don't believe that the virus is real. I understand that. There's people that are saying, I have a right to go out in public. Yes, you do, but you just don't be a dick. If we were just all nice to each other and considerate of each other, we just wouldn't have a lot of the problems that we do. And you're one of those people that just, you're so kind and thoughtful of others. I just can't see you ever being one of those people that would just stand up and refuse because you're concerned about the way your actions affect other people.
Well, thank you for that. But it just feels like if all I have to do is wear a mask and it makes you happy and gives you peace, I can do that.
Yeah.
And that's basically where I'm coming from. Other than that, let's move on because people get so upset. Like I said, these mask wars. I want peace for everybody and do as you please. Just, if you are sick, please do stay away from others.
Yep. I couldn't agree more.
Anyway, what else?
Let's talk about some good stuff. So,
yeah,
you're a wonderful actress. I had Gabrielle Stone on the show a few months back, and I remember that you did a film with her. And unfortunately, it's escaping my mind right now. It was a horror film, and you played a police officer.
Yes, it was called Speak No Evil, and it actually got picked up by. She probably told you this, but it got picked up by Lionsgate, which was a great honor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's very exciting, and it was interesting watching you in a role of authority. And knowing you as well as I do, being the sweet person that you are, it's so fascinating. And it really shows the talent that you have as an actor to be able to be aggressive and assertive, but still show a little bit of that sweet disposition at the same time. Was that something that you tried to do, or does that just come out?
I teach acting. I have my own studio, and my number one priority is acting technique, which means creating a character, building a character, knowing them so well that it doesn't matter what the words are or the script is, that no matter what they give you, you know how that person would react and what they would say. Mm-hmm. That's my way of teaching. So, I built the character and created her history, and I kind of had a feel of how she would be. And I thought, she's a strong woman. She's a cop. She's worked hard. She's no nonsense, but she still has a heart. And in the movie, when all the children are, destroyed, I won't say much more than that in case someone wants to watch it. Mm-hmm. It tore her up. She was a empty vessel at that point.
Yeah. And it really came off well. I loved seeing you in such a role that was really contrast in some ways, at least to who you are as a person. But it's also nice to see someone who has a stern role of authority in a film also being compassionate and human, because it seems like in a lot of movies, police are typically just either portrayed as sarcastic, arrogant people, or bumbling, almost Keystone Cop-ish, or just aggressive, hateful. There's not a lot of examples I can think of where, unless it's the lead character, there's a well-rounded person that they're portraying.
Well, thank you very much. That really feels great for you to say that. All I can say is that I feel that, even if your character only has a couple lines, they shouldn't be one-dimensional, because humans are not one-dimensional. We're like snowflakes. We have all kinds of points, right?
Right.
So we're not just a jerk or authoritative. That person also has vulnerabilities, and I really do try. And I thank you because you saw that, and I really appreciate that you saw my hard work. Definitely.
And you're not a tall person. You're not a big physical presence, but you definitely command attention when you're on screen. There's something about the way that I don't know if it's the way you carry yourself or what it is, but there's something about you that even if you're just walking in the background, you're a presence in everything I've ever seen you do.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's true. And I think that that outlook that you have really just kind of brings that out. The fact that you said, even if you only have one or two lines, they should be substance. And I feel like there's so many scenes where somebody just comes in and hands somebody a clipboard and says, here's the latest data or whatever. It's almost like they're just, I only have to say this line, so I just need to get through it. And it just seems like such a throwaway, why did you even bother to put this in, as opposed to somebody who could actually take that and say, here's the latest data. Somebody who could bring a little bit more importance to what they're doing.
Right. And that's what I was saying, is that if you know your character, like, you know your best friend, if something happens to your best friend, you're pretty sure you know how that friend will react.
Right.
If you know your character really well, they can give you any line on the planet and you know how they're going to say that line.
That's very true. But how much would you attribute is the actor's responsibility versus the director's responsibility for that? So let's say that you're the one that's handing somebody the clipboard, and you might go on and say the line how you said it in rehearsal, or maybe there wasn't a rehearsal, they're just filming it and you do it. How, if it plays as human or doesn't play as human, how do you ascribe or you know what I mean? Like, how do you say this was up to the actor to do a better job, or the director should have made that more human? Right.
Well, from my experience and from what I've heard and learned all these years being in the industry, the director, it's not really his responsibility to get you to be this emotion, that emotion. That's your job. Mm-hmm. And when they audition you, you present how you're going to create that character, and they say, yes, that's what I want. So it's kind of your responsibility to carry that over and create the character, because the director has a lot to do. And he really doesn't have time to sit you down in a corner and say, okay, now let's rehearse this. And he just needs you to be ready. That being said, if you should deliver something poorly or against the grain, or like, wow, that was a choice, but I've heard that one time in my career. That was a choice, but it was a really bad choice. And that's what the director would do. He would say, whether harshly or gently, would say, you know what? That's not what we're looking for. We need more of this. Or we need you to break down and cry, or I want it louder. That's where they would come in, because you're not giving them what everybody is assuming that, because you've been doing this character. But it's rare that a director is going to direct you, even though as odd as that sounds.
Right, but I get what you mean. You're kind of expected to bring a certain level of presence already, and then if you're not matching it, the director would then come in and go, that's not enough.
Right. Exactly.
Now, what kind of directors, when you're working in film, because there's a difference between directing, say, an audiobook and directing a film. When you're directing a film, or when you're in a film, what kind of direction do you like to get?
I like to be able to be left alone to work it myself. Like if I went to the audition and I got the job, I know that's what they're looking for. Mm-hmm. And I love if they give me that breath to, create the way I want to create. But I also love a director who will say after the shot or the scene, because sometimes, you shoot 20 times before the scene is over, that will give you some feedback and say, I really liked that, or, that wasn't quite right. Or some directors will tell you nothing. They'll just say, okay, next scene. And you're like, did you like it? Did you not like it? Should I improve? Should I stand up straighter? Or, so I love a director who will give you that feedback. I just love that because it helps you to be better. You can't see yourself.
Well, and you don't just want to assume that everything's okay because they've moved on to another scene. Maybe in their head, they're like, we're not going to put that in the film. We'll just move on. You really don't know what they're thinking unless they communicate that.
Exactly. And, because we're so sensitive, or most actors are very sensitive, if they don't say anything, the first thing you think is, oh, my God, they hated me.
Right.
Or they're so apathetic that, it was such a mundane thing. I mean, and, because we're sensitive, we go to those places. And I guess that's why I like a little feedback of, hey, that was great. Or if it was awful, let me know. I'll make it better.
Right. Yeah. It just seems like you would want to make sure that your actors are comfortable. And if you're not communicating with them, then they go on to the next scene and they're like, okay, this is weird. And then the next scene, like, I don't know. I guess he's happy. Your focus should be on your performance, not worried about all these external factors.
Right, right. And, like I said, directors have so much on their minds because they do everything, that they're doing the crew, they're doing the cast, they're doing the scenes, they're doing the takes, they're doing, camera views, and they have so much going on. It may not even occur. But when I did do Speak No Evil, the director there was Rose, and he was just fantastic because he left you to yourself, but he would tweak you, which felt good. It's like, oh, good, I can make it better. And he would always, at the end say, hey, that was great. Or he was, very supportive. I loved him as a director.
That's good. And it really showed, I think, in the film because, horror is kind of hard to do. You're not shooting in order. So you have to get in the mindset of where you are in that film, how much has progressed, how intense is the scene that you're shooting, and find that setting on the dial, to make that part, because you can't be more afraid now than you're going to be in 2 minutes when things have escalated further. So it's a real fine line in horror. And I think that is one thing where the director is really important because they need to know where that level should be at for each character.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the continuity gets questionable at that point.
Yeah, true enough. But, everybody tries their best, and most of the time it works, and sometimes there's those little glitches. Mm-hmm.
Yes, that's very true. Now, you also, you do a lot of audiobooks, and you're such a great narrator. How do you, when you're reading the book, because you have to read the book before you even start recording it, you have to know who all your characters are, what the settings are, if there's words that you need to find out how to pronounce.
True.
And I'm not saying that to belittle you. I mean, sometimes you might have words or a scene that takes place in a foreign country. There's words that I just look at and I'm like, I have no idea how to pronounce that. But when you're reading the book for the first time, are you already kind of hearing the character voices in your head, or do you just list them and go back and look at that later?
Well, I do. One of the neat things about books is that the author will almost always describe the character very completely, even sometimes before they speak their first word. So, this man entered the room. He was tall and thin. He had a ratty face and no one trusted him. And he entered in a very soft, whispery voice. That's how you're going to have to play that guy. Mm-hmm. So most of the time, the authors will be so descriptive, and it's great because, okay, I can build the voice around how they describe this person. Right.
And do you have, does it get more difficult the more characters that there are in a story?
Yes, very much so. At a certain point, I have a notebook and I'll just write the character's name and, because it's very physical when you do audio work. So I'll say, John Smith, and then I'll put shoulders slouched, hands clenched, head down, speaking in a very quiet, mousy voice. To remind myself when he pops up again, okay, what's this guy now? Especially if there's, 10 or 20 characters.
Sure. And some of those characters you might not see for 30 chapters. And you have to remember how you did that voice or have your editor play it back for you so you can get back into that mindset. Like if you're reading a Grisham novel, Grisham is that's one of the reasons I stopped reading his stuff was because he would have these characters pop up 300 pages later. And I don't remember who this guy is now.
Yeah.
And why he's important.
Right. Exactly right. And so in my notebook, I may put sister of main character or, person who's trying to undermine Sister Mary, or whatever. That notebook is really important when there's a lot of characters.
Well, yeah. And giving that context so that you can recall that person. Right. That would be really helpful. I've done some voice work. The only book that I narrated was my own, and it wasn't a novel, so I didn't have to do any character voices. I would think that it would be hard to just come up with so many unique sounding voices so that if the text doesn't give the indication of who's speaking, that the listener can still get a grasp on who's talking.
Right. Well, I mean, the different characters' voices, I mean, you can create hundreds if you had to. Again, technique, knowing your technique is going to take you a lot further than just trying to do it by yourself, as in anything, whether you're a dentist or whatever. But there's a thing called the voice ladder, and it goes from the top of your nose down to your groin. And it basically is, the full belly sound. And you go up and you go up and you go up, So you've got all those steps on the voice ladder. You've got, every time you change your body's posture, your voice changes. What was the other thing I was going to say? The mentality of the character. Sometimes I just move my mouth like way over to the right, and that sounds different than if I'm just talking straight out of the front of my mouth.
Sure.
So you can create a lot of characters if need be.
That makes a lot of sense. And it's interesting, too, you had mentioned that, speaking hunched over and that sort of thing. I had Kevin Ty on last week, and he does a lot of ADR recordings in his place. And he said it's really interesting to watch because people, the actors that come in, they will not work the same way that they did when they were physically doing the scene.
Huh.
And it makes a huge difference in the outcome because you don't have that physical motion. If your mouth is pointed to the ground, that's going to sound completely different in the mic than if you're facing the mic to do your line.
Absolutely.
So it's harder to match,
Yeah.
But and obviously I'm sure that you've done some ADR over the years.
Yes, a little.
But
I've done more dubbing actually in ADR than I've done my own ADR.
Really?
And that's even harder because, you're trying, either they're speaking another language or you're just trying to match up as they speak. The speed, you got to get their speed right.
Mm-hmm.
And it's challenging.
There's really a lot to it. I mean, I think people tend to have the perception that you just go into a studio with a cup of coffee and you sit down and you read for an hour and a half and you're done. No.
For the audiobook or ADR?
For ADR.
Oh, yeah. Oh, it's physically exhausting, really, because you're trying to, make that pace and make it as close to the other person's lips movement as you can, or your own lips movement. I mean, just because you did it doesn't mean you can just do it instantly exactly the way you did it the first time.
Right. And I think, too, about, I picture John Goodman doing the recording for Monsters, Inc. And there's so much physical motion that his character is performing that, again, if you don't match that or come reasonably close to it, it definitely affects the visual versus audio. And I can't watch stuff like that. If it doesn't match, if it doesn't at least make sense, I just can't even watch it.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's kind of like goes back to that basic thing where they tell people, if you're on the telephone and you're smiling, people can hear it.
Yes.
They can hear you. And it's true. It's weird, but it's true. And if you're joyful and full of energy and your arms are flailing, they can hear that too. They can see it in their mind's eye.
Yeah, you should be able to feel a smile or a frown. The emotion is conveyed in so much more than just the spoken word. It has to be brought out. And that's why reading an audiobook is really being an actor more so than it is just being a good reader. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Because you got to help people visualize. So when you're saying, a sentence and melting butter is in the sentence, you should be saying melting butter, so that they can visualize that the word sounds like melting butter.
Right. It should be felt as much as heard.
Yes. Well put.
Thank you. Every once in a while I come up with a good phrase and then I forget it.
Oh, many.
Now, you've done a ton of audiobooks. Is there any that you really kind of gravitate to, anything that you prefer to work on?
Well, it's kind of like music. I like everything. There are certain books I'm more proud of, because I think they help people. I've done a lot of horror books, which I just love because it's fun. You get, monsters and mysteries and ghosts and things like that. And so that can be fun. I've done some kids' books. But the ones that I'm just kind of proud of, one just came out. It's called Deep Living. Let me see if I can pop up the exact title. Yeah, Deep Living with the Enneagram, Recovering Your True Nature. And it's all about sort of looking at the way you think a little differently and sort of pulling back and saying, is that a healthy way of being and living? That's sort of like in a nutshell.
Mm-hmm.
That one I'm really proud of, happy about. There's one called The Children of Now that is about very, very disabled children. You know, when they're born so disabled they can't talk, or, you know, they're in a wheelchair or whatever, that they are the most evolved beings on this planet. They're so loving. They're so nurturing. They're so complete within themselves. I mean, I love that book.
Wow.
Because I think it's probably true that they are the most evolved humans on the planet because they're nothing but pure love.
Right.
The other one I really love is called Facing the Truth of Your Life. And it's another sort of take a look at your life. You know, look at the way you've interpreted your history. Is it correct? Or the way you interpret your life today, is it correct? And I'm just going to say one more because I'm proud of these. And another recent one I did was called Unmasking Prejudice, Silencing the Internal Voice of Bigotry.
Ooh.
And this woman, her name's Dr. Melody Hilton. She goes all over the world trying to dispel prejudice and trying to show people another way of looking at other people instead of saying, I'm so much better. Instead of that, saying, hey, we're all human beings here. Let's respect and love each other. Those are the books I love the most.
Well, and the thing that they have in common is that every one of those is just a beautiful message. You know, it's one of those things that gives us an opportunity to look at ourselves and see how we can do better. It seems like everybody's pointing the finger at everybody else and saying, you need to change, you need to do this. But how many people are looking inside themselves and saying, maybe I also need to be a better example?
Yeah, right. And it's not easy. And, you know, we don't feel good about ourselves if we see something we don't like. But the cool thing about, if you see something you don't like, now you've seen it. So that means you can start making it different.
Right. Well, but it takes a real honesty for oneself to see who they really are instead of this. You know, I kind of equate it to, you can take a picture of yourself and you can post it on Facebook, or you can take a picture of yourself, you can clean up your skin, you can clean up your hair, the background, yeah, so that it looks like this, you know, everywhere you go, you're taking these flawless pictures, but you also look more like a plastic person because those apps are not very good. And it's always obvious when people do that. But I think It's kind of the same thing. It's like you can see yourself the way that you want to see yourself, or you can actually do the things that make you be the person that you want to see yourself be.
Agreed.
But you have to be really honest with yourself to be able to make those changes. If you're not allowing yourself to see that you're less than perfect, you can't change it.
True. Very true. And, you know, some people go their whole lives that way, and that's okay. I mean, we have to walk our own path. And who am I to say you shouldn't be walking that path?
That's very true. It is very true. And everybody has their own way. But if you want to improve who you are, there are so many opportunities to do that. And I want to get into your work as a life coach, because I think you are just the absolute perfect person to be in that line of work. But before we do that, I do want to backtrack a little bit because I want to talk about while we're kind of on acting, I want to talk about your work as an acting coach.
Sure, I'd love to. I've been teaching for about 20 years on and off here and there, you know, as a guest teacher. About 10 years ago, I started my own studio. It's called the Studio for Actors here in Phoenix, Arizona. And, you know, I love it. And I love my students. And I do teach technique. I teach Stanislavski, Meisner method, and Michael Chekhov. And I combine, and improv, and I combine all of that in a course that sort of intermingles them from easiest to more difficult. And we work on creating characters with technique so that character, I think acting is such a bad word because you shouldn't be acting, you should be that person. Mm-hmm. So that when that person is crying, you're crying. You're not acting, you're crying.
So instead of pretending to be that character, you become that character.
Yes, just for, I mean, I'm not talking about possession.
Right.
But I'm just saying, you, like I just said before, you know them so well. You're not pretending to be them. You're being them and letting them feel and speak through you. And when they are crying, it's like watching a Hallmark commercial. Sometimes they make you cry.
Right.
Well, if you're really listening to your character and you're in the moment, you're going to cry.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Very much so, yeah.
So anyway, that's my style. But I do want to just put in there real quick that one of my students just was nominated for an Emmy.
Really?
Really?
That's awesome. Well, congratulations to your student. That's fantastic. And congratulations to you because you helped them get there.
Well, thank you. His name is Mark Grossman, and he was nominated for Best Supporting Actor in Young and the Restless.
Oh, that's very good. I think I've met Mark, or our paths have crossed somewhere.
Yeah, you probably did, because he was he studied with me for at least a year, and then he moved out to LA a couple years ago. I can't remember anymore, but
wow, I didn't know they were even still shooting soap operas.
The Emmys actually were on television, no gathering. Mm-hmm. So the Emmys, the nominations came out before the lockdown.
Right.
So they were shooting up until that point, and then they had to shut down, but they still had the Emmys. Mm-hmm. It was just over the television, and that was all.
Right. But I mean, I didn't realize that soap operas were still in production. I thought that they had all kind of bit the dust by this point.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah. No, apparently not. This one was a Young and the Restless. It's still going strong. I haven't looked at a soap opera in so many years, I can't tell you.
Because I think I mean, growing up in the late 70s, early 80s, soap operas were huge. That was daytime television. And
absolutely.
I remember, being hooked on Days of Our Lives. I wasn't really big on General Hospital, or I was going to say All in the Family, All My Children.
Oh, yes.
But Days of Our Lives was the big one. And sometimes I would come home from school and I would ask my mom, hey, what happened? How did Stefano die again? Who came back from the dead,
my father was a big, tough, strong farmer type guy. Uh-huh. But every day, I think it was at 1:00, he would come in from the fields and he would watch As the World Turns.
Oh, yeah, I remember that one, too.
Every single day. He couldn't live without it.
Isn't it amazing, though? Because those people, they kind of become your family in a way.
Yes,
or an extension of your family. You just can't interact with them. But what I really have to say, people make fun of soap operas all the time for how ridiculous some of the plot lines get. But writing 5 hours of storyline every single week, 50 weeks out of the year, because I mean, they do have a couple of breaks here and there. Right. That's ridiculous to keep. Otherwise, it's just like, okay, well, I'm going to go over to Sally's for lunch tomorrow. And no one would care what was happening. It has to be storyline, not just events.
Exactly. Yeah.
Such huge respect to the writers of those shows that can keep those stories moving forward all the time and not just make them mundane in day-to-day life.
Agreed. And, think about the actors who get their lines the day before, a couple days before, and every single day they have to create that character and say those lines. That really blows my mind.
What I'd love to know, and maybe you have some insight on this, is how do they, because they have a very, very tight window to get their show out, how do they get the dialogue down that quickly to be able to portray it naturally?
I think that they are just very amazing actors, hardworking, committed actors who that's all they do. I talked to Mark a little bit, when he got his nomination and to congratulate him. And I said, it's exhausting. Mm-hmm. Basically, it's exhausting. That's all they do. They don't have a life beyond getting their lines, studying their lines, being on set, shooting their lines. Right. It's, God bless them.
Well, and they have to be at the beck and call of the shoot all the time, because they might have an entire week where they're in every episode or half the episode, and then they might go 2 weeks and not even be on the show at all. It's really, it's a life. That's not even a job.
Right, exactly right. But if you're an actor and you love acting, then you're happy. He said with this pandemic and such, they've been closed down for quite a while. And he said, I can't wait to get back to work.
Oh, sure. Well, I mean, as a creative of any kind, that is your life. That is who you are. And to not be able to have that fulfilled to the normal capacity that you're used to, especially if you have a job like that, it just takes so much away from you feeling like a complete person. Exactly. Now, when you're working on a project, do you have strategies for dialogue memorizing? I can't speak today. Dialogue memorization.
I do. How generally you're just pounding it into your head during the day, trying to, But my big trick that works for me every single time, and I teach my students this too, is, right when you go to bed, and I'm talking about right before you turn off the light, you take your script out and you don't try to memorize it. You just look at every single word and read it, but you're really looking at every single word. And then you turn the light out and you go to sleep. And what happens for me is I wake up the next day and I'll be darned if I'm not way more memorized than I was the day before. Well, I have heard that we can control our dreams. And so maybe that's kind of an extension of that. Maybe. I don't know. But I would never not do that because it really works for me. Yeah, I remember in Die Hard 2, Robert Patrick. Now, this would have been before his role on Terminator 2, but he just had one line in Die Hard 2, and the line was a sitting duck. That's all he had to say. And I think about, okay, he probably flew in 3 days early, sat in his hotel room all day long going, a sitting duck, a sitting duck, a sitting duck, just trying all these, all these different methods. And I have no idea if he really did that or not. But not being an actor, I think if I were to try and be an actor, I think I would obsess over every little thing. Is that common? Of course. I mean, everything is common when it comes to creating. But I'll tell you something, even if you have one line, and yes, you're going to try to figure out a dozen different ways to say it, the most important thing about saying that line is, what are you thinking as you say that line? Because if he's thinking you're a jerk and I hate you and I'm going to kill you, he's going to say a sitting duck differently than, oh, you're so funny, you make me laugh. He's going to say a sitting duck very differently again, right? Yeah. So it's all about, and that's subtext. What are you thinking changes everything. And even if it's one sentence, if you know what you're thinking, that's going to guide you in saying it really well. So it really comes back to, don't be acting, be in that person's life. Right. You have to think in character. I think I know it was Michael Caine who said that when he's shooting a film and he's got the character, he knows his character, and he's in his trailer, he waits in character. He does the crossword in character. He drinks his coffee in character. I mean, that's about as great as it gets. Well, you have to, I mean, that's immersion right there. Now, if he's playing a serial killer, don't do that. For your visitors that come in, oh, I'm sorry, I got to kill you. Right, yeah. I have a destiny to do. Do you mind helping me out? But then I've heard of people like Will Ferrell, where people have this perception that you're not supposed to talk to him. But from everything I've heard from people that have worked with him, he's a very generous person. He talks to everybody on the crew. He's not really locked off, but yet he has to go out and give these intense performances where he is really immersed in his character and everything he does. And how do you get in that mindset so quickly while having all those distractions from your trailer to the set? Well, everybody's different, and some people can do that and some people can't. All I can say is he probably knows again, I'm repeating myself here, but he knows his character so well that, he can be friendly in himself and, chat. And then he gets to the set and he takes his mark. And right before they say action, I'm guessing, he's probably going into his head, remembering who he is and how what his history is or what the scene is about, and whether he's, angry or he's just kind of getting his head wrapped around what's about to happen. So you go from, haha, everything's great. And you sit down and you're like, okay, now, and this is very Meisner, he'll say, just prepare yourself, go into your imagination, he called it warming up the car. Mm-hmm. So maybe that's what Will Ferrell does. Maybe he's just brilliant and he can just pop in and out. I don't know.
It is to me as a non-actor, very, very impressive. And, I remember shooting a film with Ellen Muth, who was the star of the show Dead Like Me.
Oh,
and, we were just laughing and joking and talking. And then she goes and shoots this intense scene where, she has to be terrified. And I'm like, how do you just do that? But I believe that she did the Meisner stuff as well.
Well, it very well could be because, that is one of his basic teachings, or one of his major teachings, I guess you could say, is, and that's what he called it. I'm quoting him, warming up the car before you attempt the scene. You have to, what emotion is going on, imagine yourself into it, get your character ready, get everything into your head, go there, be there. And so that when they say action, the car is warmed up and you're ready to go.
Right. Well, it does make a lot of sense. It's just amazing to me to see how quickly people can process that and transform into that person so quickly. I'm curious, though, because, you have a space where you were teaching people, and now obviously with the lockdown, it's much more difficult to do that. You can't really teach somebody with a mask on because you're not getting the entire sense of them. How is it working doing it remote?
Well, it's okay. I think it's always better to be in person because you could, acting is about body language as well, right down to your toes. But, it works well enough. And the facials and the visuals are there for me. And the questions and the answers are the same. And working a character, the first part of that is doing what I call the work. What's their background? How do they feel about this, that, the other thing? Let's make some choices about how this character comes across. Are they, Johnny Depp's a great example of a Chekhov actor. He's called himself a Chekhov actor, combining two separate things to make yourself more dimensional. So you're like you said, I'm a cop, but I'm also a woman with feelings. And I'm able to combine that to make a more interesting dimensional character. Right.
And I would think it would be a challenge in part because there's only so much you can do sitting in a chair. And then if they get up and try to move around and really morph into that person, now the dialogue sounds different because they're moving around. So it's not being picked up on the microphone as well. You're not really getting to see them in the same way you would if you were sitting in front of them. So I would imagine it does pose some challenges.
It does. And, everybody is sort of sacrificing right now. So, and we're all doing the best we can. Mm-hmm. It's better than nothing.
Right.
That's for sure.
It seems like the important thing right now would be to keep up your chops, try and move forward where you can, but don't lose the ground that you've made so far.
Absolutely. I have one student who, she keeps asking me for a new monologue. She's just working monologues after monologues. And then when she's done, she'll call me. That's how she likes to do it. And she'll perform the monologue over the phone, and then we'll kind of tweak it and talk about it. And, there's all kinds of, like you said, to keep your chops sharp. You can just work with monologues. You can, a lot of times I tell my students, get a compilation of the best plays ever written and read them out loud and read every single character, create a character. Every time that you get a new character, be a new character. And that's a great way to stay sharp.
Mm-hmm. Well, and there's so many options and opportunities out there for an actor. It's really an endless array of things that you can explore. And everything that you explore, whether it turns out well or not, I have to think that you can learn something from.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, let's talk method for a second. Method teaches, if you go out into to a bank or a grocery store and you're waiting in line, you should be studying every single person all around you because there's a character in every single person. The way they walk, the way posture, the way they talk, the way they treat other people, a funny thing, a twitch, something odd. Everybody has something. And so as an actor, method says, study everyone you see, because you will. I mean, and I've done it a few times. Like, nobody would, if I did that character, people would say there's no human being on the planet that would ever do that, because it's so bizarre.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But they are out there. People like that are out there. And that's not bad.
No, not at all. And I think that whatever art you're in, you can find different things in everyday life. I had a friend who was in a very progressive metal band, very intricate music. Everybody in the band was incredibly talented, and he was working in a grocery store, and he was looking at the way that the milk was set on the shelves, and he took the number of milk cartons and turned that into a progression that he put into a song. So the beat was all based on the number of that and the order that they were in. And I'm like, if you really just open yourself up to it, you can find something to work with in any medium, anything that you look at in the world.
Absolutely. Michael Chekhov was a really great, kind of underrated. No one really knows about him but I call him the magical coach. He was active in the 40s and the 50s in America, but one of his exercises is to say, look at a tree and take the posture of that tree and see how it makes you feel. Look at a park bench. Take that posture. Look at architecture. How would you stand if you were that building?
Right.
See how that makes you feel. Like you said, it's everywhere.
Right. And you could also take that a step further and think about something really tall, like the Canadian National Tower in Toronto. And while it looks like it's a straight, tall thing, it actually bends quite a bit with the wind. And you could think about, how do different things manipulate me in ways that I can and can't control? And then you can take that and turn that into something. I mean, there's opportunity just everywhere.
That is brilliant, Scott. Brilliant.
Thank you. I don't know where that came from, but but there it is. So before we move on to the book, I have one other question about this. You talked about your student that is focusing on monologues, and I hear that a lot from actors, that they're always looking for new monologues. What is it that that they're looking for? Why are monologues so important to an actor?
Well, I mean, there are when you're actually a working actor and you're in a movie or a play, or even Young and the Restless for that matter, there are monologues. And monologues are generally very intense. There's a lot of emotion. There's a lot of notes. In other words, this emotion happens and then you go down and then you might go across. And it's not just one thing. So they're very difficult and they're very powerful. So you need to know how to perform. If you're going to be paid to do this job, you should be able to give us a strong monologue. The other thing, for people who are not at that point yet, but when you're in an audition, many times they'll say, do you have a monologue? Mm-hmm. And the important thing about picking the right monologue is make sure it shows more than one emotion. I mean, I would say at least 3 emotions. Because you want to prove to them that, see, I can act. I can be angry. I can be, a heap of, dead lettuce on the floor, and I can be funny all in a minute.
Right.
And that proves to them that you sure as heck can act.
Well, sure. Yeah. And would you want to pick something that relates to the film that you're shooting? So let's say that you're auditioning for a film about inner city gangs. Would you want to tailor the monologue to reflect that subject matter, or would you want to stay away from it?
Well, honestly, I would say because a really good monologue takes time to create and make it wonderful. Mm-hmm. And most auditions, it's like, next week or tomorrow, or, you don't have a lot of time. So if you try to just grab a monologue and prepare it, that might be a little dangerous for you. But what I would suggest, and as far as I know, it's the norm even in the LA and New York market, is most professional actors have at least 3 monologues. They have a comedic, a dramatic, and a classical, which doesn't always have to be Shakespeare, by the way. There's lots of classical out there, Moliere, just for example. But and they have those monologues are polished to a diamond quality. So if they say, do you have a monologue? I sure do. It doesn't have to be in respect to the work that they're auditioning for.
That makes a lot of sense.
I mean, if it's a dramatic movie, I'd pull out my dramatic monologue. If it's a comedic movie, pull out your comedic. But you want to shine. You want to say, this is the best that I can create.
Mm-hmm. But you certainly wouldn't go to an audition for a serious drama and do a comedic monologue.
I wouldn't. But if that's all you have, sure. Because ultimately what you're doing is you're trying to prove that you can act.
Right.
Whether it's dramatic or comedic or classical. And, a lot of times, from what I understand, some LA and New York actors even have what they call an abstract monologue, which is just, kind of modernistic, hard to understand, weird, wacky. But it's just another thing that you can say, see, I can do this too.
Right. Well, so you want kind of like a multi-tool that you can show a variety of your talents.
Exactly.
Because even if they don't cast you necessarily for that film, that could leave an impression on you for another film or another project or a friend's project that they have coming up. And, that could be something that would lead you to another gig.
Yeah. And that happens all the time.
I would think so. Yeah. And I would imagine that monologues are very, very helpful in the audition process. But the one person I can think of consistently who has built a solid career on monologues would be Al Pacino.
Yeah. I don't think he'd be easy to top.
I don't think so either.
He's just brilliant. And apparently he is a master of giving different takes. When you said, how do you create different characters? He just boom, 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 does all these different takes. That's my understanding, what I've heard. But yeah, and there's, and think about this, the one woman plays. Mm-hmm. That's the biggest monologue you're ever going to get because it's an hour and a half, 2 hours, and you're the only one on stage.
Very true. Very true. I had Alison Arngrim on the show earlier this year, and she does a one-woman show, and I was really hoping to convince her to come to Vegas and do it. And she was interested in it. And then, of course, everything shut down. And so I'm still hoping that that's going to come through. But from the bits and pieces I've seen of hers, it's very, very well done.
Oh, that would be exciting. Yeah. I'm so, I'm so impressed by a person who sits there or stands there for an hour and a half to 2 hours and just creates this world and never takes a break.
I agree. And I think even to be an actor who walks on for that one scene of giving somebody a clipboard, I think it takes a certain strength as a person to be willing to be filmed, be doing this with other people, where everything that they do can be judged, especially in today's social media world. I really applaud anybody who does anything. But when you look at that kind of an effort, that is, you are the sole responsibility of your success or failure. And you have to pay attention to what's the audience reacting to. Do I need to change things? Okay. Do I need to change things up? Are they listening? Are they engaged? You have to be on the go the entire show.
Exactly. And that's 100% emotion. It's all got to be there. And that, they must be exhausted after that.
I can't even imagine. And then they have to go and do a meet and greet afterwards.
Right. But it's on a high. Whenever you perform, especially in front of a live audience, there's a high there that can't be beat.
That's very true. As somebody who's performed on stage as a musician and as an actor, I can say that there definitely is nothing that you can possibly compare to that.
Right.
It's a very unique feeling. And knowing that you've connected with even one or two people in the audience, that's a huge thing. But of course, when you see the entire audience give like a standing ovation after a performance or something, there's just nothing in the world like that.
That's right. It's like you're completely full.
Right. Exactly. Now, I would imagine being a life coach probably helps you with your students because I would imagine that you approach it with that sort of empathetic way, but I'm sure that there's times where you have to be harsh and a little more direct. But do you think that it helps or hinders you to have that part of you involved in everything you do?
Well, it helps me. First of all, I don't believe in harsh criticism or yelling or demeaning. If somebody does a really horrible job, I would say, that was really good, but let's move forward. And I want you to be even better. I want you to be an A actor. I said, I want you to, I always kind of do that because they tried, they did their best, and now let's try to make it better. That's all I will ever say. Let's make it better.
I like that.
I've left acting classes crying, and I'll be darned if I'll ever do that to one of my students.
Oh, that's awesome.
There's no need for it.
Well, the thing is, too, is that I think about the way Beethoven used to teach, and he was always noted as being a very harsh teacher. And I understand that, but it seems to me that you're really pushing people is probably going to push them out the door and away from what they're desiring to be in the first place. I think if you could be honest, but you can be supportive at the same time, like that method, and encourage people to get better, and they'll keep loving their art as opposed to it being something that, they look back on and go, I'm so glad I don't do this anymore, or I hated it, or something like that.
Right. So that's kind of my philosophy. But what I found is that I can really help my students with stage fright issues, low self-esteem, confidence issues, because of my, studying life coaching. Mm-hmm. So that's what's really been a boom for me, is that they'll come in, some are confident, some are strong, some aren't, some have issues, some, they look at things, I think, in a way that causes them to have stage fright. So I said, you're feeling this way, but if we look at it from a different angle or a different perspective, hey, that's not so bad, is it? And I love to see that when that light bulb goes on, and I get a student who says to me, I used to hate cold read auditions, and now I love them. It's my heart just bursts.
Oh, sure. I would imagine, too, that as an instructor, you're also looking at them as a person and not just what they're doing as an actor. You're kind of seeing how they are, as well as the character that they're portraying. And maybe you can identify things that are going on with them a little more easily.
Absolutely. And, that's a good point, because you can see sometimes when an actor has a block and there's a personal reason why they can't reach a good performance. Mm-hmm. And, I'm really gentle with that. And I just say, I think something's holding you back. You don't have to talk about it with me, but I don't think you're going to be able to get to a certain place in your acting if you don't deal with this feeling or whatever. And they'll almost always say, that is so true. I've had this kind of in my way in life. And there's been a lot of interesting breakthroughs.
That's awesome. I love that. And that's why I think you're one of the best people to be in that position, because you are going to be looking at this with both sets of eyes, the actor and the life coach. I would guess that the two biggest things that hold people back are probably being self-conscious and about how, they appear. But also the other thing is just being afraid to let loose and really give it all.
Yeah, yes. And, there are reasons for that, whether it, we've all been affected by teachers, parents, the religious systems, telling us not to do this and not to do that, and to be respectful and controlled, and, you don't get angry and such. And it translates over into some people's acting where I can't yell because I was taught ladies don't yell. Mm-hmm. And I tell my actors two things. Kathy Bates, who's an Oscar winner, she said, if you're not able to make a fool of yourself, you can't be an actor.
That's so true.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
And the other one is Meisner, the coach, who said, if you feel like you have to throw yourself on the floor and chew on a chair leg, then you better throw yourself on the floor and chew on a chair leg.
Right. So if the inclination is there, just go with it.
Right. And sometimes it's not as easy for some people as it is for others. And that there are reasons for that, and it's the way they were raised.
Could that be affected by the particular set that you're on? Like maybe there's a director that just wants you to do things as it is on the page. They don't want to improv. Can that kind of cause a conflict there?
Well, if you're a good actor, you give the director what the director wants.
Mm-hmm.
Some A-list actors can argue and stomp their feet and say they won't do it. But in general, at a certain lower level, hey, if that's what the director wants, you've got to give it to them.
Right.
I don't think fighting is going to do you any good. It might get you fired. And that's where I think sometimes I see a really good actor in a really bad performance. I'm talking like A-list actors. And I think, the director must have just said, I really want you to do it this way. And because this is such a great actor, what happened?
But doesn't the actor kind of know what they're getting into? I mean, there are things where there are rewrites, new scenes are added, and there might be something in there that makes somebody uncomfortable. I get that. But in general, they read the script before they sign the contract. They kind of know what they're getting into, don't they?
Sure. And, it's money. I mean, if somebody's going to pay you $50,000, I wouldn't say no to that unless it was something really against who and what I am.
Right.
You are driven by that. You got to pay the bills.
There are certain things that I think are completely understandable. And I've heard a lot of cases where, and this has happened to friends of mine, where they've signed up for a film and then they get on set, they're isolated from the world. And now the director's like, yeah, you're supposed to do this scene topless.
Oh,
that kind of stuff. I absolutely understand. Pushback. That's completely not fair for them to put you in that position. That should have been discussed before anything was signed. So that kind of stuff I could understand. But in general, right. I think there is, at least with some people, probably that diva attitude of, well, I need to assert some authority as the lead actor in this film.
Well, different strokes for different folks. Sometimes it's not worth the battle. Sometimes it is. I mean, it depends how strongly you feel. Every scenario is different. But I mean, if I'm in a film and the director says, I really want you to do it this way, and it's not against my ethics or anything like that, then, fine. But the topless thing, if anybody's out there who's listening that's an actor, I just want to say, if that happens to you, the very first thing you need to do is call your agent. Mm-hmm. Your agent will handle the situation. It was not in the contract. It was not told to you ahead of time. And they have no right to fire you or force you to do the topless thing. That's the end of the story. And your agent will do the dirty work. Your agent will be the bad guy.
What about people in independent film, though? People that they don't have anybody to go to?
Well, I would say two things. If you have an acting teacher that you trust and love, call them and they will help you get through this. If you don't, you have to decide. And this is something I tell my actors as well, almost in the first class, is decide now. Will you do nudity? Will you portray smoking, drug addiction, pedophilia, murder? Know now so that when you're on a set and they ask you, you have an answer.
Well, that's a good thing. You have to know, well, you should know to an extent what your own morals are, but who you're willing to be as you become that character.
Right. And what you're willing, because, that takes you right off balance, and you might do the nudity and then you regret it the rest of your life. You need to know ahead of time so you don't get thrown off balance.
Right.
And if you're in an independent film and you're getting $100 or $500 and they say, well, we're going to let you go, then now you have a decision to make. Right?
Well, there's that. But I think part of the fear, too, is that, well, if I don't want to get a reputation of being difficult because then nobody's going to cast me. But you should never have to put up with being treated that way to have a career. That just shouldn't even be a thing.
Right. And from, what I understand, I mean, I know there's all the, Weinstein crap, and that's a whole different topic because they were doing things outside the set to get the job. But my understanding is it's kind of like 16-year-old boys. They'll keep asking you to go further and further sexually. But if you say no, in general, that's okay. But I had to try.
Right.
And it's kind of the same thing in the film industry. If you're making a film and they say, oh, we want you to take your top off, and you say, no, I'm not doing that, and it wasn't in the contract, they're like, oh, okay. And they move forward, and you have no reputation of being a jerk or, not easy to work. That is a myth.
Right. No, very, very true.
It's not going to ruin your reputation.
But I think that's part of the perception and why people end up doing things that they don't want to do, because they're so afraid that their career, that their dream is going to be crushed by some nobody director that no one even knows who they are.
Right, exactly. And that's the thing you have to keep in mind. And think about how many directors, how many hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of directors there are on the planet. They're not all communicating with each other.
Right. Yeah. It's not like there's this network where your name goes on a list and they scour this list for everyone who's auditioning,
Exactly.
But I want to ask you about one more, because this just occurred to me while you were talking about it. I don't know how familiar you are with the movie The Shining, the Stanley Kubrick version of The Shining.
Yes.
So the everything that I've heard about that movie, they talk about how horrible Stanley was to Shelley Duvall, to keep her in character, to keep her shaking and off balance the whole time, really kind of pushing her to be almost a method actor. What do you think about something like that? Because I know that there's directors that do that. They will say things to you to kind of throw you off balance so that you can go and shoot a scene where you have to be off balance.
Right. It's a technique. I think that's they're not trusting the actor's ability to create a great character. Mm-hmm. But again, I'll say different strokes for different folks. And maybe the actor said, I like that, keep it up because it makes me a nervous wreck. And we don't know what really went on.
Sure.
So if he's like, okay, I can do that, or maybe Alfred Hitchcock apparently was harsh as harsh could be. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I just think, unfortunately, it's like not trusting your actor's ability, and maybe the actor wasn't displaying enough.
Right.
So the director was like, well, I got to get this out of her. I don't think it's a good thing. I don't recommend it. I don't condone that treatment. As you know, I'm not that kind of teacher.
Right, exactly. But and you're absolutely right. We don't know what the progression of it was. The first couple of days, everything might have been fine, and then they might have sat down and had a talk or a series of talks. And as it progresses, he's like getting harsher and harsher because he's seeing that that's what's bringing it out. We really don't know. So I want to be completely fair about that. I'm just using that as an example, thinking about that sort of process. If you're hiring an actor, you're hiring them for their ability to be that character. They pass the audition, they pass the rehearsals, and it just seems when you're at that point, if they're a good actor, you shouldn't have to do that kind of stuff. But I suppose there are circumstances where maybe they're just not in it like they were in the auditions. Yeah,
and that's why I say we don't know the whole story. So it's really hard to say, oh, Kubrick was a jackass or whatever. Maybe he was. It's so hard to know. But I don't think I don't like that technique. I think the actor should just be able to work themselves up. If you have a technique to fall back on, it's the easiest thing in the world to become emotional. Now, maybe some actors don't have strong techniques to fall back on, and it takes other ways. That's all I can say.
Well, and as long as, and if it's agreed upon too, then that's certainly fine. It seems weird to me as a non-actor, but sometimes maybe you didn't realize how intense the role was going to be. And then when you get there and you're doing it, it's just so much more immense. And then you start shutting down because you're like, wow, we're isolated. They can't bring in anybody else if I mess this up. And you start feeling that pressure. I can't even imagine what that would be like.
Yeah, it's just, almost sounds like a dysfunctional family to me.
Right. Very much so. And I'm sure that the isolation probably in a shoot like that did not help.
No, and you can let that affect you as well. And if the director is very intense, you can let that affect. You can absorb all kinds of things to get yourself in a certain emotional place.
Sure, yeah, it's an interesting thing to see so many different techniques to end up at the same destination, and I think that's one of the really cool things about really all facets of entertainment is it's not just one road to get to the destination.
Absolutely not. And there are people like you say who maybe Will Ferrell, he just can pop in and out. Who knows?
Yeah.
I would say that, I know for a fact that he studied at the Groundlings. So he has studied, and I don't know beyond that how or what he's studied, but he is studied. He's not just a guy off the street that, I'm a natural. Nobody's a natural. To be really great, to be, among the best, you may have a lot of natural capability, but until you have technique, you're never going to be. It's like, what do they say, that 10,000 hour rule? Basketball players, musicians like you've put in well over 10,000 hours.
Yeah, I probably.
That's the difference between the men and the boys, or the girls and the women. You have technique.
Mm-hmm. And it's not just the number of hours, it's how you spend them. If I were to, I'm learning to be a bass player. I've been an entry-level bass player for about 6 years now because I haven't really sat down and put the time in. But, you can sit there and you can practice on your one string or whatever you're going to practice. But if it's not focused practice, if it's not stuff that challenges your current skill level, then it's just time spent.
Right.
Yeah. Now, I want to talk to you about one other thing, because on top of all these amazing things that you do, you're an actress, you're a life coach, you teach acting, you do audiobooks, you come up with all these really cool character voices. You wrote a book.
Yes.
Can you tell us about that?
Sure. And my book actually it's just pure life coaching. That's where it came from. It's not an acting book. But I did graduate from the Southwestern Institute of Healing Arts as a life coach. And I was life coaching quite a lot back in those days. And, I things would come, like, how you said, I don't know where that came from, but it just came right out of my mouth. Well, that happens to me too. You get an intuition or a thought. It's like inspiration. You didn't come up with it. And I was writing them down because I thought they were great. And after about a year, I had this huge stack, and I said, oh my God, I could write a book. So I did. And it's called Power Tools, Ideas You Can Use to Disassemble Fear. But it's also about living life to the fullest, taking those risks, feeling good about yourself, not worrying about judgment. If you can play one note right on your xylophone, then God bless you. And if that makes you happy, who cares?
Right.
That kind of stuff. I can read you something from it real quick. Like I have these things I have these things called big thoughts. They're like, it take up the whole page, but they're only a few sentences. And they're all throughout the book. I'll just read this one popped out. So let's trust the universe. It's called A Rumination. The birds waiting on my dry and silent fountain flew away when I turned it on, just when what they waited for was bestowed upon them, just when something good was about to happen. Do you fly away just before something good is about to happen? What if you bravely stood your ground and joyfully accepted those incoming gifts with open arms?
Oh, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. And it's so true, because I've also seen this really brilliant meme of two people that are digging a tunnel. And the one is about to strike it rich, and he's just still picking away with his pickaxe. And the other person is about to strike it rich, but they're tired, they're done, I give up, and they're walking away right when they were about to hit gold.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a lot of that. I think that we just tend to burn out, or because we don't see a certain level of success or growth that we want to see, we tend to bail.
Yeah. Or if you're wanting something and it finally is coming to you, you get scared and you push it away.
Very true. I think there's also a fear of realizing your dream, because once you've attained what you've been fighting for, then what?
Yeah, it's, the challenge of life.
Very much so. But now I want to say, because I live in Vegas, this strategy does not apply to slot machines. Do not sit there and keep playing because you think that you're about to hit the jackpot. Okay, that rarely happens. Not a good gambling strategy.
Yeah, so true.
everywhere else in life. Absolutely. And I think too about the birds as the people that, try to keep you down because they're not maybe living their life to the fullest. And as soon as they see that you're starting to emerge, they kind of filter out of your life a little bit because they know they can't keep you down anymore.
Exactly. And I do touch on that in my book. There's most of my chapters are only 3 to 5 pages long. And, yes, I touch on that as well. Absolutely. Or if they're not doing that, like, disappearing, they're trying to pull you back. Come back down here where the rest of us are.
Right. Right. And it's so sad because if everyone could get past the fear and just go for the things that make them happy in life. And I say that with the caveat of things that do not hurt other people, because there are things that make people happy that hurt other people. I don't mean that.
Exactly.
But I think if we could just all focus on what we're doing, support each other, and let's all get there together. There's plenty of room for everyone. If we had 100,000 more actors that wanted to, or people that wanted to become actors, then we would have 100,000 more productions would be created to accommodate for that. There is absolutely room for everybody.
Agreed.
But there's so many people that just can't seem to want to do anything but be angry and hurtful to others. And I'm sure you have a hard time with that mentality. I do.
Oh, I very much so. I mean, it just breaks my heart. I just keep, and it's childish, but I keep saying, why, life is hard enough as it is. Why do you need to fuel the fire of ugliness? Mm-hmm. It just, I don't know, it's beyond me, but.
Do you think that some of that is really, I mean, obviously a lot of it has to do with upbringing, but do you think that some of it almost might even be genetic? Your family has a history of hating these kind of people. There's something that gets woven into the DNA generation over generation. And then you're born with it as part of you because we aren't born hating anything.
Right. Exactly. So I don't think it is.
Well, I guess I answered my own question.
Yeah. We're clean. When we're born, we're clean slates, we're, right on us. I mean, there might be some genetic disposition to short tempers or, I don't know. That's the ultimate question, and science hasn't answered it yet. Mm-hmm. But what was I going to say about that? I read a book a while back about brain injury. Whether you fell off your bicycle or you're in a car accident or someone beat you up or however someone might get brain injury, they have found that almost every serious criminal has had a brain injury.
Really?
So, that could be part of it too. I mean, you can't fight that.
Right. Well, that's very true. Yeah.
So, maybe that's part of it. I don't know. But having been raised in a very abusive family, I can tell you that a lot of people do keep the cycle going. I was abused, so I'm going to abuse. But, my number one priority when I became an adult was peace, peace, peace.
Yeah.
I just did not want any part of that lifestyle.
Well, and you're right, though, because I've heard people say things like, well, my dad beat me and I turned out okay. So no, you didn't. If you're thinking that's okay to do to somebody else, you did not turn out okay. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. Just, and, everybody has their own perspective and I can't, what is it? 6 billion people on the planet now?
Something like that. Yeah.
6 billion realities.
Mm-hmm.
We all see it differently.
Yeah. Very true. And I think even if it doesn't become ingrained into the DNA, it's certainly input into people through their very, very developmental years. Because if that's the mentality of, say, a family member or the family, like in your case, that gets pushed into our heads very, very quickly. And that becomes the way that we see the world. And that's why it takes generations of getting away from it, of changing your thinking and starting new lines of how we look at things for it to really get better.
Yeah. Yeah. And that I think is a big part of, what is needed in human evolution. That's where we need to go.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would normally ask if you have any projects coming up, but with everything being kind of shut down, you're really kind of restricted to what you can do. So is it pretty much mainly audiobooks and teaching right now?
Yeah, it's teaching. In fact, I have a Skype session after I talk to you.
Oh, nice.
But yeah, teaching on Skype and audiobooks. And the reason why the audiobooks are still going is because when I go to the studio, it's just, the studio manager and me.
Right.
And they're they wipe down everything and super clean everything to the point where, it's like a hospital room. But so those are keeping me going. So right now, as far as the acting community, I don't even know of any filming projects that are going on at all.
Yeah, I've seen one that's happening in Phoenix. I think they've wrapped up production already, but it looked like a very, very small, closed set. Everybody was wearing masks except for the actors. And it really is just a weird time to be doing anything. And, we don't want a bunch of movies where everyone's wearing masks. And that's what this generation is putting out, but at the same point, I think people are kind of thirsting for content and for new things because there's only so much that's coming out. Even in the music world, a lot of bands are delaying their releases because they can't do the tour to support it.
Right. That's so true. And that's absolutely true. The new content isn't there by any means. And, thank God for Netflix and Hulu and all that. People are staying entertained that way. But
that's going to run out at some point because they only filmed so much before the lockdown.
Right.
There's only so much to edit and release. Then it comes to a lot of their original shows like Stranger Things is who knows when that's going to come out because they didn't, as far as I know, did not finish shooting that before every production was shut down. So, thank God there's millions of movies and things out there already. But I think that becomes kind of, how many movies can you just sit there and watch? I got to move around once in a while,
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big reader. I love to read. So I've got like 4 or 5 books going at the same time. Working around the house, making the house a little, sharper than it was before. And I have a garden going and I got a dog that I adore and she just is love and entertainment all rolled into one. And I got a great husband.
Yeah.
That we get along like best friends. So I'm blessed with a lot of good things right now, even though it's a tough time.
And you put a lot of good into the world for what you're given. You definitely are one of those people that doesn't hoard it.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. We're going to put the links to those books that you recommended and to your work in the show notes as well. And I hope that people check it out because I think that you're such a dynamic and caring person. You're really one of the people that I would say is a model for how I would like to see society to be. So thank you for being you.
Oh, thank you. And, I feel the same way about you. We've been dear friends for a long time, and there's a reason.
That's true. I miss having coffee with you, but it's hard when you don't live in the same city.
Right. But I just want to quote my 95-year-old cousin. She said, "We will meet again."
Oh, yes. Yes, absolutely. We definitely will. And if not, we can always do like a Skype coffee.
Sure.
I love it.
All right, darling.
Well, thank you. You take care and have a great lesson.
You too. You have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
What did I tell you? Just a warm ray of sunshine, this one. And it was a great time speaking with her. I'm sure that you guys enjoyed the interview as well. She's got a lot of great things to say. Very knowledgeable, very talented, and she has no problem sharing that with others, which I love. Check out her work. Check out her acting school. I got a couple demo reels in the links as well. Thank you, Alexandria, for taking the time to come on the show. Love you dearly. And for the rest of you, come back next week for my very special episode. You fans of rock and roll will be especially excited. Feel free to reach out to me at scott@scotthaskin.com. Please remember to leave your ratings on iTunes, Apple Music, anywhere you're listening to the show. It does help me a lot, and it's great to see that people are enjoying it. See you guys in a week. In the meantime, stay safe. Be great to each other. Cheers.